I love faceting gemstones, and I think it's a great hobby or profession. But for many decades, there's been a major affordability problem with getting started. I was often asked how to find a faceting machine on a reasonable budget, and I just didn't have a good answer. The American companies that used to sell beginner machines like Sapphire, Graves, Lee, and MDR are long gone. The top brands are still around, but they're pretty pricey. The used market is risky, with a lot of scams and inflated prices, and even if you get a deal, they're often incomplete or broken in odd ways. I think I bought 5 machines over the years before a friend sold me one of his that was in good shape, and I could finally cut my first stone. And last of all, there are cheap import machines. Very affordable, but not fully functional out of the box. Faced with this, I decided to develop a kit to make these cheap machines viable, including upgrades and the missing parts needed to cut a complete stone. I call this the CutKit. On this table, I have everything you need to start faceting gemstones for under $500. A Vevor faceting machine, our CutKit 2.5, an alcohol lamp, WD-40, a craft knife, paper towels, and 2 buckets. Let's start with the CutKit. First, we have a cover sheet with a starter design on it, our custom vertical post or mast, along with a girdle plate that slides right onto it, a magnetic transfer jig, or if you get the CutKit 3, this large format sliding jig, 240 and 600 grit plated laps for cutting, and 2 copper laps for polishing, your polishing compound for the copper laps. Don't worry, they'll be full, this is just my personal one. Tongs for holding things over the alcohol lamp, a pair of 6mm and a pair of 10mm dops, dop wax and superglue, which can be used together or separately to attach stones to the dops, a wooden dop holder, our sliding water shield, a knurled brass lap nut, though unfortunately these don't always fit because Vevor changed their tolerances after I had them made, a set of replacement nuts and bolts, a permanent marker, a kit for shimming the motor on your machine, a piece of lab ruby for burnishing your laps, and finally 3 pieces of laser garnet for starter rough. Now let's have a look at the machine. This is the Vevor KD8801. This is the one I developed the kit for. It's the best value and the most complete option. There are other similar machines that our kit also works with, but they need additional fixes, and I'll show those off at the end. Once we get it opened up, the first thing we see is this manual, which is completely useless. Check it out responsibly. First, we have this 600 grit topper lap, along with the aluminum master lap that all the other toppers will sit on. This bag has hardware for the pump, as well as dops and the table adapter, which we'll look at in a moment. This box has the water pump in it, and now we can remove this layer of styrofoam to see the machine itself. We have the original vertical post with brass height adjuster. Next is the faceting handpiece. We have a standard power cord, the yoke with the protractor, and now the machine itself, which typically doesn't come out easily. I'd basically pour it out myself. And there you have it. Honestly, it's a lot of machine for about $200. So step 1 is to plug the machine in and run it for a little bit at max speed. Normally things are fine, but every now and then they'll immediately die or start overheating right away. If it does any of that, don't continue running it. Contact whoever you bought it from to return or fix it. But if none of that happens, turn it off, unplug it, and we'll continue setting it up. First, we take the height adjuster off of the mast and then set it aside. Instead, we're going to use the CutKit mast. That just slides right onto the base, and you can tighten it down with this large thumb screw. Now let's upgrade the height adjuster. It comes with these 2 knobs, which are not very good. We replace the top one with a bolt that won't bump into the yoke, and the bottom one with an adjustable handle that grips a lot tighter. I've noticed that some of these handles have a sharp end that might mar the post. In these cases, it's a good idea to rub the end against your 600 grit lap a little bit to smooth it out. Now we slide that on and lock it in place. Next, remove this long hex nut from the handpiece and replace it with this nicer knurled nut. Then rotate this brass part, called the cheater, until it's roughly in the center, then mark one of the grooves with a permanent marker. This will give a visual idea of how far it's been adjusted. Now for the yoke. Vevor recently added these spring-loaded ball detents to keep the handpiece from popping out, which is kind of nice. Go ahead and slide this onto the post, then insert the handpiece, pushing it through the detents if they're present. Now let's look in that bag. This is your table adapter dop. Remove the tiny set screw in it and replace it with this nicer thumb screw. This bolt just isn't needed anymore. There are also 2 dops in there, which are a handy addition to the ones in the kit. And now for the water pump. Turn this thing on the pump so it's more closed to help reduce water flow, since it wants to put out way too much. Next, insert this plastic part into the hose. This is difficult but doable. Then clamp it using one of the clamps. And insert all that into the pump. Now put one of the clamps on first, then push the other end of the hose into the brass hose barb. Once it's on, tighten the clamp. The dripper attaches magnetically to the base right there and provides your water drip. Incidentally, this is the water outlet from your machine. Make sure it's over one of your buckets before you turn the pump on. Remove this hex nut and put on the brass knurled nut if desired. Now take that back off and put on your master lap and lap washer, then lock them on. Next, we're going to calibrate the protractor. When I bought my first few machines, they were always really close, but now they're usually about 4 degrees off out of the box, which is a lot. To address this, we're going to take off the yoke and the brass height adjuster, and then lay the yoke directly on this girdle plate. Then move the entire post backwards so there's room. Next, we're going to set the protractor to 90 degrees. To do that, we loosen this knob on the back of the protractor, then push the stop upwards so the handpiece is nearly horizontal, then lock it back in place. Then we can do fine adjustments with this bolt until the sharp point points at 90 degrees. Then we lock it in place with the thumb nut. Next, insert a 6mm dop into the collet and tighten it. Move the post so the dop is hanging just over the master lap. Now we're going to lower the handpiece by turning this thumb nut until the dop barely touches the master lap. If the dop edge was perfectly flat against the master lap, you're good to go. But if it's tilted like this, then the protractor is off, in this case by quite a bit. To fix this, we'll remove one of these flathead bolts holding the protractor on and replace it with one of these panhead bolts included in the kit. This allows us to adjust the position of the protractor. Leave these protractor bolts a little loose and adjust the height until the dop is flat against the master lap. This is your true 90-degree position. Now move the protractor until it reads 90 degrees like it should, and then get the bolts really tight. Now your protractor's calibrated. Now there's only one more step. It's a little more involved, but it's totally worth doing. Out of the box, the motor is usually a bit tilted relative to the base plate. That basically means as you move your stone across the lap, you won't get the same depth of cut. Fortunately, we can mostly fix this by putting some shims between the motor and the base plate. So step one is to make extra sure you have unplugged the machine because we are going to be working inside it. After that, we're first going to diagnose the problem. Remove the yoke, add your height adjuster back on, and set your angle to 45 degrees on the protractor. Take out your shim kit from your cut kit and insert this pointy dop into the handpiece. Adjust the height until it's barely touching on the near side of the lap, then sweep it slowly across the lap. If it just stays the same height above the lap the whole time through, you're good to go. But in this case, I can feel it trying to dig into my master lap as I sweep it across, which means the far side of the lap is higher than the near side. To figure out how much higher, I put the dop over the far side and adjust the height until it's barely touching there. Now when I sweep it back to the near side, you can see this big gap under the dop. Not to worry though, this really is an easy fix. First we remove the pump, then the master lap, then we'll need to remove the splash pan, which is held on by 3 Phillips bolts. Make sure to save the bolts and then carefully pull it out, feeding the water drip hose through the base. This exposes the 4 bolts which hold the motor onto the base plate. We're just going to loosen these a little bit but not remove them. Next, we're going to take off the handpiece and set the machine on its side, being careful not to hit anything with the vertical post. Now you can see this bottom plate which is held on with 8 bolts, 4 in the feet and 4 more around the edge. Remove all of these and again, don't lose them. Now we can see the bottom of the motor. Make triple sure this is unplugged. Now we take the shims and put some under the side that was too high. In my case, the far side was too high, so I need to put shims at the bottom. I'll start with 3, experience tells me it's usually 1 to 3. We'll just gently wiggle the motor up a bit, slide the shims under the lip, push it into place so they don't fall out, then reach around and retighten those bolts on the top face. Now we just set it back vertically, put the master lap and handpiece back on, test it again. In this case, it only took 1 try and I got it just about perfect, but it may take 2 or 3 adjustments. You can change both the number of shims and their exact placement to fine-tune things. Once it's good, you can just put the bottom plate and feet back on, reinstall the water shield, and now your machine is good to go. There's still some limitations to this setup, and we do sell additional upgrades for better precision and quality of life, including my precision handpiece, protractor, and table adapter. I developed these because I cut with one of these myself, so anything that I want, we need to make. But those are optional and you're ready to cut a stone with this base setup. And in the next video, I'll show you how I do that. But for now, stay safe and happy cutting. Now, as I promised, here's a quick note on other base machines. This very similar looking Vevor KD8802 is sold outside the US instead of the KD8801. It's a little more expensive, but otherwise it works just as well with the kit, and it actually has a slightly better motor controller. Now this generic one is very similar to the 8802, almost certainly made in the same factory, but not quite identical. There's no slot at the end, so you'll have to feed the bolt in from below to install the mast. It also comes with an inferior protractor with bad markings, and often with no hard stop at all. You're gonna have trouble using this protractor, and I'd recommend getting ours as an upgrade. You'll also need to modify the handpiece so the angle indicator is actually workable. This is just way too blunt to point at any specific angle. You can either sharpen it on one of your laps, or you can scribe a line onto it. Either way, you just want to be able to read a specific angle with it. This lightweight model is also widely sold, sometimes cheaply, sometimes very expensively. I don't know why. It does work, but it only has speed control on the motor, not directional control, so you can't spin it the other way, which is usually not needed, but when you do need it, it's really nice to have it available. Like with the other generics, the bolt has to be fed through from below, and like the other generics, it comes with a bad protractor, bad angle indicator, and it doesn't come with a table adapter. This similar looking model from Fable is unfortunately not compatible, as all the dimensions are a little bit different. You could certainly use the base, just the rest of the mast isn't compatible. These cast iron ones with the long legs technically work, but they don't have a speed control on the motor, just on-off, so I wouldn't really recommend them. That's an important thing to be able to control. But otherwise, the Vevor one's totally compatible with the kit, and generic ones will need the same fixes as other generics. This rare, gigantic 12-inch version actually is compatible, but I don't recommend the digital setup that often comes with it. You would probably want to get our protractor and use that instead. Incidentally, I don't recommend either of these cheap digital options. They're affordable and the idea is great, but they just don't give precise enough results. Thanks for watching, and let me know if you have any questions in the comments below.